Negative exponents. There are some situations where expressions have negative exponents. Whenever an exponent is negative, the expression is not considered simplified fully until there are only positive exponents remaining. So, how do we manage to turn a negative exponent positive? Let's go through some examples below following these steps. Okay, so step 1 is circle whatever has a negative exponent. And in example 1, well, it's the 8 to the second, right? It's the whole thing. So I'm going to circle the whole thing. Step 2, it says if what you circled is on the top of the fraction, move it to the bottom. Awesome. Well, we know that it's on the top of the fraction because there is no fraction bar. Okay, so it's just on the top automatically. So we need to move it to the bottom. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to draw a fraction bar, and I'm going to draw an arrow saying, okay, I need to move that to the bottom. Okay? We're going to skip step 3 because it's not on the bottom of the fraction. And I'm going to actually move it, okay? Now, when we move an entire part out of the numerator, there is always 1 remaining. So a 1 is still going to go up there, okay? And then on the bottom, I'm going to write 8 to the positive 2. Because step 4 says once you have moved what's circled, it becomes a positive exponent, okay? And then from here, we want to simplify. So what is 1 over 8 squared? Well, 8 squared gives us 64, right? So I write 1 over 64. And then we're done. That's all you do. You just move it, and that's it. It becomes positive. Okay, example 2. So I'm going to circle what's being raised to a negative, which is x to the negative 12. It's on the top, which means it needs to move to the bottom. Okay? So we move it. Remember, a 1 is remaining on top. And it becomes a positive 12 after we move it. And we can't simplify this any further at this point, so this problem is done. Example 3. Now, to the I can't circle any negative exponents for this problem. But let's use quotient of powers and see what happens. We know quotient of powers, we need to take y to the 2 minus 9. And well, 2 minus 9, that gives us negative 7. So now do you see we actually have a problem with a negative exponent, even though it didn't look like that at the beginning. So now we need to circle this y to the negative 7. It's on top of the fraction, so it needs to move to the bottom. Again, a 1 is up there after we move it, and it becomes a positive 7 after we've moved it. And that is our final answer. Now, when expressions become more complicated, it is important that we only move the parts of the expression with negative exponents. Remember, negative exponents either move from the top of the fraction to the bottom or from the bottom to the top. Parts of the expression with positive exponents stay where they are. We do not need to move those. Okay? And I'll show you what you mean on these next, or what I mean on these next examples. All right, example 4. Again, only circle what's being raised to a negative exponent. So I see a to the negative 3 and c to the negative 8. Everything else is being raised to a positive exponent. Now notice I didn't include the 2 with the c to the negative 8, so be careful with that. And then I'm going to simply move the c to the negative 8 from the bottom to the top, and the a to the negative 3 from the top to the bottom. So this b squared stays because it's positive, b squared, and then c becomes a positive 8 because we moved it, right? And then on the bottom of the fraction, that 2 is still hanging out down there, and we move to the a to the negative 3 so that it would become positive. And now we want to check if it's fully simplified, and it is because there's no negative exponents. So we are done. Okay, example 5. Now, before we start moving things, let's first multiply these two expressions. This times this, okay? So remember, we want to multiply the numbers first. So 7 times negative 2 gives us negative 14. And x to the negative 9 times x squared. Remember, we add the exponents. So I get x to the negative 7th power. And now we can simplify because we know, oh, we don't have it, or we have negative exponents, and that's not good. We don't want any of those. So I'm going to circle what I see as negative exponent, which is just the x to the negative 7. That guy's going to move down there. The negative 14 stays on top. And the x becomes a positive 7 at the bottom of the fraction. And we're done. Okay, example 6. The first thing I would do with this one is I would circle my negative exponent that I see, and I would move it from the bottom to the top. Okay? So then we're going to have x to the 8th, x to the 2nd, y squared, z over y squared, z to the 3rd. The next thing that I would do is I would multiply these two because they have the same base, right? And we know that we just add them when they have the same base. So that would simplify to x to the 10th, y squared, z over y squared, z to the 3rd. Next, what I would do is we want to use quotient of power property with the y squared over y squared. Remember the trick I taught you guys? If they have the same number as their exponent, they just cancel. All right, so that's easy. And then we have z over z to the 3rd. Now remember, this is z to the 1st power. So all that we have left is we have x to the 10th, and then we want to take z to the 1 minus 3 using my quotient of powers property. And z to the 1 minus 3 gives us z to the negative 2. Now, am I done yet? Not quite, because I see a negative exponent, right? So I'm going to circle that negative exponent. It's got to move to the bottom. The x to the 10th stays on the top, and we get z to the positive 2 on the bottom. And I am done. Last problem. So the first property we want to use is the power to a power property, which, remember, we apply this negative 4 to everything inside the parentheses. And we're going to multiply. Remember, the a is being raised to a positive 1. So I'm going to take 1 times negative 4. We get a to the negative 4th. I'm going to take, for the b, negative 4 times negative 4. Remember, a negative times a negative is a positive number, so we get positive 16. And for c to the 5th, I'm going to take 5 times negative 4. We get negative 20, like so. At this point, we just need to move whatever is negative. So I see two situations where there's a negative exponent. That's one of them, and a to the negative 4th is the other. Notice the b to the negative, or b to the 16th stays up top. That c to the 20th power becomes positive now. And we get a to the positive 4 on the bottom. And we are done. There are no more negative exponents remaining.